In 1920, Prohibition did not just close America's saloons. In Chicago, New York, and Detroit, it turned hotels, back rooms, newsstands, and winter streets into a hidden arms race between police and men who made money faster than the law could follow. Police checked waistbands, coat pockets, ankles, and car trunks. Gangsters answered with collars, gloves, hats, cigar boxes, belt buckles, newspapers, overcoats, and sedans that looked ordinary until the room changed. By the late 1920s, Detroit and New York police reports described shootings where witnesses said the shot came through a newspaper. By 1934, Washington was no longer chasing only gangsters. It was chasing weapons they had learned to hide. Number 14 was not hidden in a pocket. It sat on the table like business. Number 7 made Chicago hear politics through broken glass. Number 3 did not need a case. Winter carried it. And number 1 was not carried by a man at all. It rolled under luxury paint. Before we start, hit subscribe. Let us count down the 25 hidden weapons Prohibition gangsters carried under police eyes. Number 25. The collar stay stiletto. In a Prohibition lobby, a clean shirt could hide more than sweat and nerves. The collar stay stiletto was a thin blade, often no longer than 4 inches, shaped to pass as the metal strip that kept a dress collar stiff. In Little Italy and the Lower East Side, where tailors worked close to gamblers, runners, and men with cash jobs, shaped steel did not have to look criminal. It only had to look tailored. A doorman could check a coat. A detective could pat down a waistband. Almost nobody wanted to pull apart a man's collar before a sit-down. This was not a fighting blade. It was a last answer for a room where betrayal sat across the table. It could pass through a doorway that no pistol could pass. The shirt looked clean. The man wearing it did not have to be. Number 24. The cigarette case pistol. The cigarette case belonged naturally in the 1920s. It sat on poker tables, hotel desks, and speakeasy booths, flashing silver when a man offered someone a smoke. That was what made it useful. Nobody feared the object because every gentleman seemed to carry one. Underworld stories from New York treated small metal cases with suspicion because they could make danger look like courtesy. A man did not have to reach under his coat. He could place the case on the table, let the room keep talking, and let everyone assume business was still business. The trick was not firepower. The trick was timing. It could turn a polite gesture across a table into the first move of an ambush. In a back room full of smoke, even offering a cigarette could change the air. Number 23. The vest pocket revolver. Before the sleek automatics took over, the cheap vest pocket revolver lived in the lower floors of the underworld. These were small 5-shot guns, often chambered in 22 short or 32 inaccurate, past a few steps but useful at the distance of a restaurant table. In the 1920s, small Iver Johnson and Hopkins and Allen revolvers could cost only a few dollars. That mattered. A gun cheap enough to buy with a night's winnings was also cheap enough to lose in a storm drain before detectives reached the block. Police reports rarely made poetry out of them. They were just little revolvers, found late or not found at all. At 10 feet, accuracy was not the point. A barrel under the table did not need range. The cheapest gun in the room could be the hardest one to trace. Number 22. The FN Baby Browning. The FN Baby Browning was small enough to be underestimated. It weighed about 6 ounces, measured just over 4 inches, and could vanish into a waistcoat pocket, a folded newspaper, or the corner of a winter coat. Around 1,925, a tiny pocket pistol like this could cost about $15, placing it within reach of low-level bootleggers who needed insurance more than status. The cartridge looked almost laughable beside a service revolver, but across a card table, inside a sedan, or in the narrow hallway behind a speakeasy, small did not mean harmless. It was not made to win a street battle. It was made for the moment when the distance had already disappeared. It could end a conversation before anyone reached the door. The Baby Browning was built for distance measured in chairs. Number 21. The sap glove. Not every hidden weapon had a barrel or a blade. The sap glove looked like ordinary leather driving gear, the kind a man could leave in a coat pocket without drawing a second glance. but sewn into the knuckle area was weight, lead shot, powdered steel, or another heavy filling that changed what a punch meant. Garment districts produced gloves by the thousands, and one darker pair did not advertise itself. That was the protection. If a cop found leather gloves, he found clothing. If a rival saw them on a man's hands, he saw manners until the first blow landed. There was no muzzle flash, no shell casing, no blade flashing under a lamp. It could put a man on the floor before anyone saw steel. The glove was not the disguise. The glove was the alibi. The first 5 weapons were dangerous because they could disappear on the body. A collar, a case, a pocket, a glove. Nothing there looked large enough to change a room, and that was exactly the point. But from here, the underworld got harder to read. The next weapons did not always need to vanish. Some could sit in public, on a man's head, in his hand, or near his shoes, and still escape suspicion. Police were not only searching for steel and gunmetal, they were searching through assumptions. And in the Prohibition years, assumptions were often where the weapons lived. Number 20. The lead line fedora. Every gangster wore a hat, but in Chicago, a fedora could be more than style. Along streets like Maxwell Street, old stories told of hat makers lining the crown with thin lead or steel, turning a $3 felt hat into rough protection for the skull. The point was not to stop a bullet. Nobody with sense expected felt and sheet metal to defeat a pistol round. The danger it answered was quieter. A blackjack strike from behind, the kind of blow that could end a backroom argument before a man ever saw who swung. If that first hit bounced, instead of breaking bone, the wearer had 1 extra second. That was enough time to turn, draw, or run. The fedora did not make a man invincible. It made the first ambush less certain. Number 19. The razor in the hat band. The hat could also hide something sharper. In Harlem numbers rooms, Southside policy operations, and crowded speakeasy backrooms, a folded straight razor could sit inside the hat band without changing the shape of the hat. A good razor was cheap in the 1920s, small enough to ride flat, and ordinary enough to explain. Barbers used them, men shaved with them. Street collectors and low-level enforcers found another use. It needed no ammunition, made no gunshot, and left no shell casing for a detective to pick up under the table. It was not always carried to kill. Often, it was carried to leave a memory. A dead man could not pay. A scarred man remembered who sent him. The hat stayed polite until the razor came out. Number 18. The Colt Model 1903 Pocket Hammerless. The Colt Model 1903 looked less theatrical than a Tommy gun, and that was its strength. Chambered in. 32 ACP, holding 8 rounds, and weighing about 24 ounces loaded, it was smooth enough to slide from a coat pocket without catching on cloth. It was called hammerless, though the hammer was really hidden inside the slide. That smooth shape mattered in a hallway, a sedan, or a hotel room where a second of fabric snag could decide who left alive. Around 1,925, one cost about $20 new. Not cheap for a working man, but reachable for someone earning Prohibition money off the books. Police knew bulky revolvers. The 1,903 felt like a different age. It could clear a pocket before another man cleared his nerves. The danger was not noise. It was clean design. Number 17. The blackjack. For silence, few weapons matched the blackjack. It was usually a leather pouch filled with lead shot fixed to a short flat handle and small enough to vanish into a trouser pocket or coat lining. In the early 20th century, blackjacks and leather saps lived in a legal gray area. Police carried versions of them. Private citizens bought them for protection. Enforcers used that confusion because the object did not immediately explain intent. A man could say it was for self-defense. The man on the floor told a different story. There was no muzzle flash, no blade under the light, no loud report to bring patrolmen running from the street. One swing could remove a witness from the room without firing a shot. The blackjack did not announce violence. It edited the room. Number 16. The ankle-holstered derringer. The ankle derringer was the weapon left after the obvious search was over. Remington's over and under Derringer design dated back to the 19th century, but Prohibition gave small two-shot pistols a second life among bootleggers, speakeasy owners, and mid-level runners who needed one last answer. The cartridge was not made for distance. At more than a few steps, it was a poor tool, but under a table, beside a car door, or in the tight hallway behind a club, distance had already collapsed. A waistband search could miss what sat below the knee. That was the fear. A man could look disarmed, sit back down, and still not be finished. It could turn a harmless reach toward a shoe into the last shot in the room. The ankle Derringer lived below suspicion. Number 15. The Knuckle Duster Knife. The Knuckle Duster knife carried a piece of the First World War into American alleys. Its grip worked like brass knuckles, while a short blade, often 4 to 6 inches, projected forward from the fist. Some versions used a spike instead of a blade, making the shape even uglier. Veterans brought trench knives home after 1918, and machine shops learned the pattern quickly. In the 1920s, a crude copy did not require a famous maker. A few dollars in brass, scrap steel, and labor could turn war design into street equipment. This was not a gentleman's pistol. It was made for hallways, stairwells, and rooms where a gunshot would bring too many people running. It could turn one close-range swing into panic before anyone reached the door. The war ended overseas. Its geometry kept walking through the city. Number 14. The Cigar Box Pistol. The cigar box pistol was not hidden in a coat. That was what made it worse. It could sit on a desk during a meeting, beside an ashtray, a glass, and a folded newspaper, while everyone in the room thought the object belonged there. Early 1930s New York raid stories described strange desk weapons that officers understood only after the search changed direction. A cigar box already belonged in a gangster's office. It smelled like money, patience, and business. No doorman asked a man to empty the furniture before a sit-down. The danger was psychological before it was physical. The room watched hands, waistbands, and coat pockets. It did not watch the box already resting between two men. It could aim from the table before anyone thought to stand. The weapon was not hidden on the man, it was hidden in the meeting. Number 13. The belt-buckle Derringer. A pat-down usually had a pattern. Arms, ribs, coat, waistband, pockets, ankles if the officer was careful. The belt itself was touched, but the buckle was often treated like clothing, not machinery. That blind spot made the belt-buckle Derringer one of the strangest ideas in the Prohibition underworld. Oversized buckles could hide tiny single-shot or double-shot pistols, often discussed in connection with small rimfire cartridges like 22 or 41. Production was never large. The rumor mattered almost as much as the metal. Midwestern sporting catalogs and back-page gun talk gave the design a half-real, half-underground reputation. Some survived as oddities. Others may have existed only long enough to scare detectives into looking twice. It could put danger in the one place a search had already touched. The search found the belt. It missed the answer. Number 12. The Smith & Wesson Model 10 Belly Gun. The Smith & Wesson Model 10 was not exotic. That was the point. It was a .38 special revolver, 6 shots, usually with the kind of plain reliability police departments trusted through the 1920s and 1930s. Al Capone's image belongs to Tommy guns and armored cars, but one revolver linked to him was seized during a 1928 Miami arrest. The lesson was simple. A man who lived around expensive weapons still respected a gun that did not jam. The shorter 2-inch versions became known as belly guns because they were made for the distance where a barrel did not need sights. Pressed close under a jacket, under a table, or beside a car door, the revolver did what early automatics did not always do. It fired when asked. The Model 10 was frightening because it was ordinary enough to trust. Number 11. The Newspaper Revolver. In a 1920s city, a folded newspaper made a man look normal. Commuters carried one, bookmakers carried one, men waiting outside hotels carried one. That made it one of the best disguises in the street. Late 1920s, police reports from Detroit and New York described shootings where witnesses said the shot came through a newspaper. The method was crude, but the cover was perfect. A snub-nosed revolver could sit inside the fold, pointed forward while the hand looked like it was only holding the evening edition. After the shot, the paper tore, burned, or fell apart. The object that explained the trick almost destroyed itself. No holster, no visible draw, no warning shape under a coat. It could fire before the room understood what the hand was holding. The newspaper did not report the crime, it delivered it. By now, the pattern was clear. Prohibition gangsters were not only hiding weapons, they were hiding intention. A cigarette case could be business. A cigar box could be furniture. A newspaper could be the evening edition until a witness heard the shot. The underworld had learned that police searched objects by category: gun, knife, club, explosive. But the street did not work in categories. It worked in moments. From here, the list gets colder, stranger, and more specialized. These were not just things a man carried because they were small. These were objects chosen because they changed what a room, a street, or even a city believed it was looking at. Number 10. The ice pick. The ice pick was frightening because it did not need a criminal shape. It belonged in kitchens, hotel service rooms, bars, delivery carts, and any place that still handled block ice. A simple pick with a wooden or metal handle could cost almost nothing at a hardware counter. In early 1930s city stories, especially around Murder Incorporated, the ice pick became the kind of object detectives hated because it explained itself too easily before it explained the wound. There was no gunshot, no casing, no powder smoke, no dramatic flash under a street lamp. A man could carry one through a crowded station and look like he had a reason for it. It could leave less noise than a dropped glass. The ice pick was not frightening because it was rare. It was frightening because the city already had thousands of them. Number 9. The spring-loaded sleeve knife. The spring-loaded sleeve knife belonged to the darker edge of underworld invention. New York and New Jersey stories spoke of forearm rigs hidden under suit sleeves, built from small springs, straps, and pieces of shop-made metal. They were not elegant weapons. Some were crude enough to look like garage work. Others were clean enough to suggest a careful machinist. What made them disturbing was the timing. A searched man could hold out empty hands and still not be finished. In a doorway, an office, or the back room of a club, that mattered more than beauty. No catalog needed to advertise it. No storefront needed to claim it. The few examples that surfaced later looked less like a product than a secret somebody built for one job. It could make an empty hand hard to trust. The blade was not drawn. It arrived. Number 8. The Colt 1000, 911 inches, 38 Super. The 38 Super Colt 1911 marked a different kind of arms race. This was not only about hiding a weapon, it was about what the bullet could defeat after the weapon came out. Colt introduced the 38 Super in 1929, and the cartridge quickly attracted attention because of its speed. Period gun talk placed it around 1,300 feet per second, fast enough to worry men who had started trusting early bullet-resistant vests. Until the 357 Magnum appeared in 1934, the 38 Super stood near the top of American commercial pistol power. That detail mattered in a decade when both gangsters and lawmen were learning that armor could change a shooting. The underworld did not just ask, "Can I hide it?" It asked, "What happens when he thinks he is protected?" It could make early armor feel like a bad promise. The 38 Super was not just a caliber, it was an answer. Number 7. The pineapple bomb. Chicago in the late 1920s gave the pineapple a meaning that had nothing to do with fruit. The name pointed to the ridge shape of a First World War fragmentation grenade, small enough to disappear into an overcoat pocket and ugly enough to turn a private warning into a public event. During the 1928 primary season, Chicago politics became so violent that pineapple stories moved through newspapers, police talk, and neighborhood rumor. Some accounts claimed surplus grenades could be found on the black market for only a few dollars. That was the dark arithmetic. War leftovers became street messages. A rival speakeasy window. A witness's porch. A polling place that suddenly understood who wanted control. It did not need precision. It needed sound, smoke, glass, and fear. It could make an entire block understand one warning. In Chicago, the pineapple was politics with a fuse. Number 6. The tear gas fountain pen. The tear gas fountain pen belonged to a different kind of prohibition fear. It did not look like a gun, a knife, or a club. It looked like something a clerk, gambler, lawyer, or hotel man might carry in his breast pocket without thinking twice. By the late 1920s, personal protection catalogs and city advertisements were full of small defensive gadgets. Some promised safety without the noise of a pistol or the blood of a blade. In the underworld, that same idea could turn darker. A little metal tube, shaped like an ordinary pen, could make a room blink, choke, and lose its first few seconds. That was the value. Not a fight won cleanly, a doorway gained, a witness confused, a rival forced to cover his eyes instead of reaching for his coat. It could buy the only thing a cornered man needed: 3 seconds. The pen was not dangerous because it wrote. It was dangerous because nobody watched it. From here on, the list stops being clever and starts becoming industrial. The earlier weapons hid inside manners, clothing, furniture, and street habits. They worked because people looked at the wrong thing. But the final 5 belonged to a darker level of prohibition violence. These were not just tricks for getting past a search. They were answers to raids, ambushes, armored rivals, police pressure, and the growing belief that a man who controlled the first 3 seconds controlled the room. Now the weapon is not only in the pocket, it is in the coat, the gun shop, the winter street, the back seat, and finally the car itself. Number 5. The coat pocket sawed-off shotgun. The coat pocket sawed-off was ugly because it did not need to be elegant. A double-barrel shotgun, cut down short enough to disappear under a winter overcoat or long duster, gave a gangster close-range force that no pocket pistol could match. By the early 1930s, short-barrel shotguns had become so closely tied to criminal violence that the National Firearms Act of 1934 placed them under federal control. The law imposed a $200 transfer tax, a brutal sum in Depression-era America. Washington was no longer only watching who carried a gun, it was watching barrel length. The appeal was simple and dark. In a hallway, beside a car, or across a speakeasy doorway, distance was already dead. The shotgun did not need precision, it needed 1 crowded second. At 10 feet, elegance did not matter. Hollywood remembered the Tommy gun. Men in small rooms remembered the shotgun. Number 4. The Lebman baby machine gun. The Lebman baby machine gun came from the strange gap between invention and law. Haman Lebman ran a gun shop in San Antonio, Texas, and during the Dillinger era, his name became tied to some of the most extreme modified firearms in the American underworld. The idea was not to make a pistol look grand, it was to make a handgun act like something much larger. A Colt 1911 could be altered into a compact automatic weapon, paired with extended magazines and a forward grip. In underworld stories, the result looked small enough to carry, but violent enough to change the room before anyone understood what had happened. Before 1934, federal law had not yet caught up with every shape a weapon could take. That was the opening. This was the nightmare of the period, not a factory machine gun on a battlefield, but a pistol-sized storm from a city gun counter. It could turn a draw into 2 seconds of chaos. Lebman did not just modify guns. He exposed the loophole. Number 3. The Overcoat Thompson. The violin case became famous because it looked cinematic. The Overcoat Thompson was worse because it was practical. In Chicago, winter did some of the hiding. Heavy wool coats were normal from October into spring, and a man walking through cold streets did not look suspicious because his coat hung thick and square. Under that cloth, a Thompson could be carried without the theater of a case. The weapon did not need music, performance, or assembly in a hallway. It needed weather. The common street version used the logic of concealment rather than display, less visible shape, less time exposed, more surprise before the first reaction. By the late 1920s, that mattered more than style. Police could watch a man's hands and still misread what the coat was carrying. It could fire before the weapon fully appeared. That was the fear, not the gun everyone saw in photographs, the one hidden under ordinary winter. The overcoat Thompson made weather part of the weapon. Number 2. The rear seat arsenal. By the time Prohibition money moved through big sedans, the back seat became more than a place to sit. It became storage, cover, and insurance for men who expected trouble between one club and the next. A rear seat compartment could hide what a gangster did not want on his body during a search. Spare handguns, extra ammunition, a short weapon wrapped in cloth, or cash that needed to disappear from plain view. Police could pat down the driver, search coat pockets, and open the trunk. But the passenger cabin had its own secrets. Upholstery, seat backs, floorboards, and hidden panels could slow a search long enough to matter. By the early 1930s, city detectives were learning that a sedan was not just transportation, it was a moving room with locked corners. This was not armor yet. That comes next. This was the hidden reserve before the steel showed itself. It could put another weapon within reach after the first one was found. The back seat did not only carry passengers, it carried the next move. Number 1. The armored car door. The most hidden weapon of the Prohibition underworld was not held in a hand. It rolled down the street under luxury paint. Gangsters in Chicago, Detroit, and New York paid body shops to turn sedans into moving cover. Interior door panels could be lined with steel plate. Windows could be protected. Compartments could hide weapons behind upholstery and trim. From the sidewalk, the car still looked like money. Polished bodywork, clean glass, a driver at the wheel. From the inside, it could become a shield. Al Capone's 1928 Cadillac became the perfect symbol of that world, not just transportation, but armor, storage, status, and threat in one machine. A police revolver that meant something in an alley meant less against steel hidden inside a door. For a brief stretch in the late 1920s, organized crime did not only outgun parts of law enforcement, it out-armored them. It could make a patrolman's weapon feel small before the first shot was answered. The armored car was the final hidden weapon, a Sunday drive with steel under the skin. These weapons came from a country caught between appetite and law. Prohibition did not make the underworld inventive by itself. It gave inventive men a market, a reason, and a deadline before police learned what to search for. A collar could hide a blade, a glove could hide weight, a newspaper could hide a shot, an overcoat could hide a machine gun, and a polished sedan could hide enough steel to make a city patrolman feel underarmed before the door even opened. That was the real lesson of the 1920s gangster world. The most dangerous object was not always the one in plain sight. It was the ordinary thing nobody questioned until the room changed. Tell me which weapon surprised you most, and hit subscribe for more forgotten history, the movies cleaned up.